Welcome to the podcast about venture capital, where investors and founders alike can learn how VCs make decisions and reach conviction. Your host is Nick Moran, and this is The Full Ratchet.
Welcome back to TFR for a special installment of Investor Stories. In this segment, the investors tell a story about some of the most odd and unusual situations they've ever encountered as investors. This is the segment called The Strange and Unusual. On today's special segment, we have Monique Woodard of Cake Ventures. Monique, what's the strangest, most unusual, or most memorable startup pitch that you've received?
So when I was still at 500 Startups, we had a company who was doing skincare. I think it was skincare products for men, and they had a butt mask.
Wow.
I actually think it's quite brilliant, and the type of consumer that they were going after, this definitely fit. And but it was just sort of the conversation we had to have as investors around the table. I'm pretty sure we ended up doing the deal, and the company sells the company. I think it's a Korean-based skincare.
Really?
Company.
Wow.
Yeah. But one of the products was the sheet mask that you put on your face, but this is for your butt.
Wow. Okay. Well, I feel like I've heard it all now.
Only I would come in here and tell you that story.
I love it. I love it. On today's special segment, we have Sach Chitnis of Jump Capital. Sach, what's the strangest, most unusual, or most memorable startup pitch that you've received?
I think we have some strange ones. We had at the time the most unusual stories. I've seen people come into pitch and have, essentially acted out scenarios, like, as if they're in a play. I think that was the most unusual thing I've seen. The best pitches, candidly, are very short. I think most people will tell you that when I see a really crisp deck that can tell the message, and in one meeting I walk out saying, boy, not only do I understand the problem you're going after in 10 pages, but I really like these people, I can tell you we'll write a term sheet pretty quickly, relatively speaking. And some of our best investments were exactly that. In the first conversation, we understood. Some of our, ones that have struggled, we'll say, or have needed more time to kind of mature. It's usually by the second or third meeting, you realize that you understand really the nuance of what they're going after. And the problem, and there are a lot of nuanced problems being solved. The problem with that, if you can't crisply tell me the investment, target or, partner, how are you telling your customers? And so there's a, R squared of 0.99 on messaging and being able to be crisp on your, what you're solving, that I think is a failure from my perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a skill. It takes time for founders to work on that and hone it in. On today's special segment, we have Brendan Wallace of Fifth Wall. Brendan, what's the strangest or most unusual pitch you've received?
It was actually, it was really interesting. It was right as we started Fifth Wall, and we kind of announced to the world that we were, the emergent real estate tech fund, which at the time didn't really mean a lot because there weren't really any other institutional real estate tech firms. But in so doing, we attracted all this attention, as you can imagine, from many of the real estate tech companies that, were growing swiftly at the time. And they were like, oh, there's now a real estate tech focused venture capital fund. We should bring them into our round. And we talked to two companies, and one of the companies was very clear was going to emerge as the category winner. That company is today VTS, and they subsequently actually acquired the other competitor that we were looking at. And I built a really strong relationship with the CEO, Nick Romito, and he had closed a round like 6 months before. And I remember thinking it was like one of our first investments. It might have actually been our first. And I remember calling him up and being like, will you just open up the round for us? And I was like expecting him to say no, and what typically happens in the venture world. And miraculously, he was like, yeah, I heard about you guys. Let's do it.
No shit. Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, I thought it was like, delusional. I was like, this is our first investment. We're just getting started. At the time we had like 75 million under management, but it was like so shocking. But what it was unusual about it to me was it changed a misconception I had about how we needed to source deals. So what most venture capital funds spend a lot of their time doing is focused on sourcing and turning over stones that no one else turns over, or getting there before Sequoia gets there, the top VCs that will outcompete them. What's interesting for Fifth Wall is we don't have to source nearly as much. And so what we spend a lot of time doing is supporting our portfolio companies. And the best entrepreneurs kind of come to us, which is really counterintuitive. But to me, that was like the first moment that actually happened. And I just never expected it to. So it was very surreal, but also really exciting. And now we're thrilled to be investors in that company.
You never know unless you ask, right?
Exactly.
I was just talking to a guy earlier today. He's like, Nick, how do I get on your show? And I'm like, well, considering we know each other, you could just ask.
Yeah.
It's not that big of a deal, but different than an investment, of course. On today's special segment, we have Mike Smerklo of Next Coast Ventures. Mike, what's the strangest, most unusual, or most memorable startup pitch that you've received?
It's funny, Nick. That's what makes the job so fun. Sometimes you kind of go, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
I've seen everything from. I saw this one. I was thinking about that. We saw one for VR to train baseball players to pick up various pitches, and you got to do like VR and watch a Major League Baseball pitcher throw a baseball at you, and watching a curveball in VR, watching a curveball come from a major leaguer, it was like, oh my gosh, that was wacky. I also saw one. We actually invested in this great company in Austin called Icon that's doing 3D printing of homes, and when they were raising the capital, you had to go to their office, and at first it seemed a little bit, I don't know, presumptuous, but you went to their warehouse and they have this huge, massive device that they can 3D print a home in something like 36 hours.
Whoa.
And they're doing it for the military. They're doing it for low income housing. They're doing it for, hurricane struck areas. And it was a great example of an entrepreneur knowing his product in this case, because he said, you won't get this unless you come see it. And he's right. And we were blown away. We're like, wow. Super cool. But that was a wacky one where you're like, there wasn't a PowerPoint. There wasn't a come to our office. It was like, you got to come to this warehouse and watch a house get 3D printed with cement. It was like, holy cow, this is cool.
Do they go on site and print it where it's going to stay, or do they do it in the
No,
facility?
it's called Icon Building. It's all cement, and they actually have contracts with NASA to potentially put these on the moon. But they right now, wow. So think about one of the use cases. Think about a military base in a remote outpost, and normally the troops are sitting there in makeshift canvas tents, whatever. They can drop in with the device and the software and print, and it's cement, so they can print a permanent home or base right there, and it takes like 2 days. Wow. Fully configured. It blows you away. And also, when you think about one of the real crises in the U.S. and in the world is just low-income housing, being able to go out to places in a very affordable way and literally print nice, small footprint homes in a very very short time frame. It's really cool.
Love to see the unit economics on that and how it evolves over time. It sounds like the future.
Yep.
That will conclude this installment of Investor Stories. If you're enjoying the program and would like to see it continue, take a moment and leave a 5-star review in iTunes. Also, if you'd like updates on new content from TFR, as well as the top 10 VC articles every week, go to fullratchet.net and sign up for the newsletter. Okay, that will wrap things up for today. Until next time, over-prepare, choose carefully, and invest confidently. Thanks for joining me.